Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're calling from. My name is Ben Mahesson, and I'm the BJ Membership and Account Manager here at BJ, and will be hosting today's session. So yeah, welcome to the second session of the African and Middle Eastern Capacity Building Workshop. This series is dedicated to addressing the needs and wants of business schools in the region of Africa and the Middle East. In this workshop, speakers will delve into their professional experiences in implementing sustainable practice in their business schools and how business schools can leverage the SDGs to play an instrumental role in addressing societal and environmental changes. I'm absolutely thrilled today to be joined by Helmi Hammami, the Senior Advisor for Knowledge Transfer at Rennes School of Business, Ali Awni, Professor of Practice and Director of the J.D. Gerhart Center for Philanthropy, Civic Engagement and Responsible Business, John Foster-Pedley, Dean and Director of Henley Business School and Chair at Association of African Business Schools, and Jane Usher, Head of Department of Postgraduate Studies at Milpark Business School. So shortly I'll be handing over to the speakers, but I'd just like to say that I will be keeping the chat box open and the Q&A. So if you have any questions at all about the presentations that each of the speakers will be doing, put them in the Q&A box and we'll answer at the end. So this is a learning and sharing atmosphere, so please feel free to ask any question at all. And the way that it will be working today is each of the speakers will have about 15 to 20 minutes to do a little bit of presentation. And once we've gone through all 4 presentations at the end, we will then open it up to Q&A. Okay, let's get started. So first I'm going to hand over to Helmi from Rennes School of Business. Helmi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ben, for this introduction, and thanks again for the invite. So I'll share my screen. So let me know whether it is okay with everybody. So this screen, is it okay for everybody? Yeah, you see my screen?
Yeah, just put it in slideshow and then it should be ready to go. Presentation mode. Yeah. Looks good.
Yeah, wonderful. So as an introduction, my name is Helmi Hammami. I'm from Rennes School of Business, France. Actually, I'm full professor of accounting and senior advisor for knowledge transfer. And I'm leading a special interest group on financial literacy and for inclusion. And recently, I'm a member of the accreditation governance of the African Association of Business Schools. So you might ask yourself, we are talking about Africa and Middle East. So what this guy from France is doing in here? The answer is easy and straightforward. I have a special interest in developing markets, specifically Africa and the Middle East. And I come from a country originally where I got a big part of my studies when I grew up, which is at the crossroads between Africa and the Middle East. So originally I come from Tunisia. So this interest remains, despite the fact that I'm evolving here in France. This interest in Africa and the Middle East is always there. So at the beginning, and my apologies for my colleagues in the presentation, at the beginning, the topic of my presentation was to be more focused on financial inclusion. But then I said, okay, financial inclusion is a very specific topic. So in order to make things more open to everybody and something that I'm very involved in it right away, which is knowledge transfer. So why not talking about knowledge transfer, the role of business schools in knowledge transfer, including this knowledge and transfer outside of the business school frontiers, and how this knowledge transfer could be a good springboard, to foster African business schools' contributions to sustainability. So at the beginning, I was kind of, before starting preparing the presentation, the question is straightforward. I mean, what is sustainability, first of all? So I started looking at this, sustainability, and in my opinion, this is one of the definitions I like most about saying sustainability or sustainable development. It's the first one where the word sustainability has been used. So sustainable development, it was coined in 1987, by the way, by the World Commission on Environment and Development. So sustainable development is development that meets the needs of today without compromising the ability for future generations. As easy as that. So in the end, three dimensions that are there to improve the quality of life for everybody, which is the environmental dimension, the social dimension, and the economic dimensions, or today it proved to be the governance, so the ESGs. So this is in the end, something very easy, straight to the point about sustainability. So to make the link, I was looking at the innovation index. 2021, the Global Innovation Index for 2021. This is, as you may see in front of you, the distribution of the top science and technology hubs around the world. And as you see it in here, so basically there are, if I look at Africa itself, besides, Western Africa, a bit from the East Africa, South Africa, and North Africa, the middle is basically empty, looking just at Africa. Same thing applied to the Middle East. So basically, when it comes to innovation, Africa in general, Middle East in general, we are lagging behind. If you look at China, if you look at India, not to talk about the already established countries, look at Europe, it's all blue. Look at the United States from the other side, some Asian countries that are taking the lead, specifically China. So they are really, really doing a great job in terms of innovations. Whereas, when it comes to Africa and Middle East, we are still a bit behind. So this is somehow the top innovators when it comes to distribution by region. So if we take the sub-Saharan Africa, for instance, South Africa comes first, then Kenya, then Tanzania. If we take the Northern Africa and Western Asia, we have Israel, United Arab Emirates, and Turkey. So I'm not talking about the developed countries which are taking the lead. So there is a long way to go, still a long way to go when it comes to innovation. But the point is, innovation. We cannot do innovation just sitting, in our offices. Innovation is open. Innovation is about knowledge sharing, and that's what leads us to the topic of today, which is about knowledge transfer and knowledge valorization. So actually, there are several definitions about knowledge transfer. By the way, I didn't want to make this, or I don't want to make this this presentation scholarly and academic presentation. So I tried, to put my hat as scholar a bit away to give some more practical examples which will come, and the experience we lived at Rennes School of Business that might be shared with you. So knowledge transfer in the end is a set of activities aimed at the dissemination of knowledge, experiences, skills in order to facilitate the use, application, and exploitation of knowledge and research and development of the university outside the scope of academic by other institutions. So really, really would like to look outside of our institutions. So this is a very basic definition, 2022. One of the definitions I like most is the one advanced by Cambridge, which is knowledge transfer is a term used to encompass a very broad range of activities. So it gets back to what you do, the activities, to support mutually beneficial. So here it's a win-win situation, collaborations between universities, businesses, and the public sector. So basically here, it's a win-win situation when it comes to sharing knowledge with the outside, our business schools. So when it comes to knowledge transfer, there is a myriad of channels, to share knowledge. First of all, we have our students. That's our vocation. We train students. Our students, they go for internship, then they are on the job market. So these are like very good channel to disseminate the knowledge that we create in our schools, in our universities. Training and workshops. So this is also part of knowledge dissemination. Then you have research projects and publications. That's also, and this is actually, something very heavy. I'll talk a little bit about it later. Joint research projects and scientific publications that serve the community, that serve the businesses, that serve the society. Consultancy, new business creation, community engagement. So all these are channels with which we could transfer knowledge to outside the boundaries of our organizations. So this is what we call the knowledge triangle. So the knowledge triangle, it's a 2012 model that basically tried to make the links between research, higher education, and businesses. So as you may see, there are exchanges between the three dimensions at all levels. So when it comes to research, just I'll take one dimension, for instance, the link between research and businesses. So for research, new knowledge is the source of innovation. So research is about being creative, getting this new knowledge, but also from the other hand, the business opportunities point to new research avenues. So when you listen to your stakeholders, when you listen to the businesses, you might be creative in your research, and vice versa. When research informs or solves problems that businesses have. From the other hand, higher education. So when I say higher education, so that's the model, I took it as it is. But when I say higher education, basically it's the teaching activity that we put in place. So here, as you see, we provide skills to businesses, and from the other hand, what we take from businesses is the knowledge of new market development for education. Then the link between research and higher education, of course, skills are key to improve research and development. Then knowledge improve, or creation of new knowledge improves education. So why I'm putting this model in here, because this model is the model that drove our strategy at Rennes School of Business for the last for the strategy 2018-23 and for the upcoming strategy. So basically, we are putting this model as a roadmap so that we foster our entrenchment in the society, we foster our linkages with our stakeholders, and to boost our impact, if I would say, because the word impact will come so often. Of course, when it comes to knowledge transfer does not come without challenges. There are lots of challenges. As you may see, so business schools are not seen as hubs of knowledge creation. I think, many of you experience this. Okay, you guys, I come from accounting. When I sit with chartered accountants, the first thing I say, I hear, oh, you guys, you do research in accounting? Wow, how it comes, what's about the standards? No, we're not talking about the standards. We are talking about theoretical inputs to that could help you. So there is a misperception in here about what business schools do, how business school could create the knowledge. So this leads to an incompatibility of the narratives, you see. And usually what happens in business schools, we live in a bubble that is disconnected from the reality of the society, that is disconnected from the business needs. And this creates, this expectation gap. Business schools curriculum misfit. That's a very important challenge. I've seen part of my research is about the development of accounting professions in developing countries, and I've been looking to the MENA region specifically, and obviously in the literature I had exposure to what is happening in Africa. Yes, I mean, when it comes to accounting education specifically, we have a big problem between what we are offering to our students and what the market is expecting from these students. And we may develop this later on, but this has like very long roots starting from the legacy of colonialism, etc. Lack of awareness of the importance of knowledge transfer. People, they don't know what knowledge transfer is, either from business side or even in the business schools themselves or at the university themselves. If it is not, this knowledge transfer is not entrenched in a global strategy, institutional strategy, then there will be like big problems to put it in place and to push it forward. Of course, this subject or this point touches too many of us, which is the lack of funding, you know, and specifically right now with what's going on in the geopolitical sphere with the war in Ukraine. A couple of years ago, we've been in COVID. So funding becomes scarce, and obviously getting companies and stakeholders joining this idea of knowledge transfer and creation, co-creation of knowledge, I would say, is becoming a little bit more difficult. And obviously, everything is relative. It depends where you are and the socioeconomic system you are evolving in. Of course, there is a lack of clear development policies. You know, that's what I was saying. You know, either at the university level, or at the country level. Sometimes, you know, we don't know what we would like to do. We would like to do everything. We would like that our universities and business schools to be at the top of everything. But in the end, we are doing nothing because there is no clear strategy where education would like to go. But this is also another challenge, which is about the brain drain. You know, too many of people we have, skilled people that would take the legacy and make this knowledge transfer evolve. They just quit the country and go for other opportunities. So quickly, of course, when we're talking about knowledge transfer, as you may feel, this is an all new topic. You know, it's about, you know, creating this collaboration between the university, the knowledge creation hub, and the outside stakeholders. So the partnerships. So this is what we call the partnership continuum. It's developed by the UIDP in 2012, and it remains so far, you know, valid continuum. I'm not getting into the details of it, but as you see, so there are levels in the partnership from the early beginning, which starts by the awareness, so getting in touch, in contact with corporations or the outsider stakeholders, to sealing like strategic partnerships with the socioeconomic environment. And by the way, this is the framework also we adopted whenever we were drafting the strategy of the school. So as you may see, you know, getting outside or getting our knowledge at the service of the ecosystem we are evolving in is something strategic in what we have been doing so far. So Rennes School of Business. Rennes School of Business So Rennes School of Business is an international school, but we wanted to move from an international school to an international school serving local challenges. So just to give you a glance about Rennes School of Business. So Rennes School of Business is a business school that was created in early 90s by the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Rennes. So the objective was to train qualified leaders, accountants, finance people to serve the regional needs. So that was the essence of the creation of the school. Early 2000, the board at that time took a bold challenge to make this regional school and to transform it to an international school. So they took the challenge. The challenge was so far successful because as of today, Rennes School of Business is a triple crown accredited business school. It holds the 10th position in France in terms of ranking. I would say it's also the first school in France in terms of internationalization, in terms of international staff serving at the school. We have plus 5,000 students, from which 50% and more are international, 100 professors, 90% of them are coming from abroad. And this is, something we are proud of, but also something that is creating too much challenges. 100% of the curriculum we offer is in English. And we have so far plus 150 publications, academic publications, highly ranked publications a year. All this is good, but Rennes School of Business turned to be a foreign school in its own environment. So let's not forget that we are living in France. So now we have this entity that is called Rennes School of Business, that was a local regional school training local regional staff to become an international renowned school with 100 plus faculty members, which are the engine who produce knowledge, but who are not French. And that was the challenge. That was the problem we faced. So the strategy was clear. In 2018, we sat all together and we decided that we would like to keep the DNA of the school, the international DNA of the school, but we wanted a school, despite the fact that it is international, a school that gets back to its own environment, a school that should be entrenched and serves the local needs, a school that talks to the local entrepreneurs, a school that talks to the local businesses. So 2019-23, we wrote this first strategy to recenter, which was recentered on the local socioeconomic environment. But of course, as many of you have experienced that, we got the COVID meanwhile. It was tough times, but we all survived that challenge. And now we are drafting the 23-26 strategy, which is centered on impact. And when I say impact, it's really the impact, the local region. So that I don't make it very long, I just took some examples of actions we have taken in the school. So now in the school, we have kind of two boards. One, which is a local board, very entrenched in the local ecosystem. I would say that the advantage of this board that we have, despite that they are operating locally, many of the people sitting on the board, they have international experience and international exposure. So that helps a lot. So they are bringing their own international experience, they put it in place, or they shape it to solve regional and local problems, and they are helping us as a school by sitting in our board. But from the other hand, we also have an international board, and that's what we call the International Scientific Committee. So this board is mainly also, as you see, scientific committee. It advises the school on the strategies to adopt for shaping the research, etc., and to put the research at an international level while keeping it, serving the society. This board is mainly composed from people coming from abroad, so that they bring their experiences from abroad to the school. What we have done, we spent some time talking with our faculty members, with the external stakeholders, so that we define some areas of expertise where the school could be good at. And in the end, we have these areas that fit what the region is known for. For instance, artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. The region here, Rennes, or the region, Brittany region, where we are located, is the hub for the French cyber defense. So we found ourselves as business school, we could contribute to this dimension, and we created an area of expertise related to that. Agribusiness, the region is considered one of the top regions when it comes to green, to agriculture. So we had now people working on agribusiness. Rethinking tomorrow's organizations. So this is another center or another areas of expertise that we have created, because with the advent, Rennes and its region is known for techno startups. So organizational behavior at a point will come. We are a business school, let's not forget it. We're not an engineering school. So helping these entrepreneurs to think about tomorrow's organization, how the work will be done, etc., was on the table, and the discussions with these entrepreneurs led to the creation of this hub, which is called Rethinking Tomorrow's Organization. Supply chain. We have very active and dynamic areas with many small and medium enterprises. And of course, logistics supply chain is something that goes without saying when it comes to transportation, to export, import, export, etc. And actually, during the COVID, we had several solicitations from companies in here, small and medium enterprises, to help them think the way they will act or react to the COVID crisis. So what we have done also is we put a system to reward people who work on solving local problems. Yes, publications, international publications are good, but in the end, part of our strategy, we would like people to really work with companies on local problems. So we put some kind of incentives to push people to work on this. And also we incentivize people to work with local entrepreneurs to create or to write together case studies about their successes, their failures. And now what we are doing, these cases will incorporate them into the classroom to teach our students about real companies from the region. So I put in upper letters, over contact, economic partners. So when I say over contact, so basically we worked hard to open as much as we can channels of contacts with our partners. So either through the corporate relations of the school or through open seminars to the public, through the research centers, etc., etc. But we made sure that everybody, whoever has something to present to the external environment, to go and to do the job. Also, and partially we were successful in this, we engaged our PhD students to work, and faculty to work with local companies on real problems that the companies are facing. For instance, we have students who are working on weather forecast, modeling weather forecast and its impact on the agriculture. So these kind of things we put in place. Of course, listening to corporate needs, this goes without saying. But this is part of the strategy that we put in place. Our teaching is at the heart of what we are doing. Then, as you may see, the community and the corporate connections we have here, the faculty excellence is there, our areas of excellence, etc. So this is the model. If you see it, it reminds you a little bit about the model I presented a bit earlier, where we have the research, we have the pedagogy, and we have the business network. So all these three dimensions, they interact together. We try to bring our research into our classrooms. Our classrooms will have the businesses. The research will talk to the businesses to solve real problems for these companies. Just I would conclude with this. So this is one of the exercises we have done. We went through a global mapping of our partners. But here it is not, the map is much more complex than that, but just we put like the bigger ones in our environment. So this kind of map is distributed to everybody, faculty, researchers, etc., so that they are aware about these strategic partners, I would say, and to solicitate them, to work with them, and so that we create this synergy and this knowledge transfer. So this is the case of course, Rennes School of Business, which is, as I would say, a case that could be transferred to any country, in that sense that as you see, we started as we started as a local school. Then we took the challenge to become an international school. At point, we faced the challenge that we are totally disconnected from our local environment. So then, starting from 2018, we reverted back to our local environment. So this is what we have done. So far, I believe we are successful in this because, you know, the school started to get the recognition, sorry, it deserves in its local environment. We work hard on this idea of knowledge transfer. It's supported by the highest decision makers at the level of the business school. And it goes without challenges, of course, but the best is to come, I would say. I would, on this, I would thank you for your attention and open for questions. Ben.
Hi, Helmi. Thank you very much for that. So for questions, what we'll do is we will answer them all at the end and make like kind of a conversation with all of us. But yeah, if any of you have questions, put it in the Q&A box and then we can read through them at the end. So yeah, thank you very much for that, Helmi. It's very interesting. Now we are going to move on to Ali Awni. So yeah, Ali, the floor is now yours.
Thank you. Let me just share my slides. Okay. Now, the title of my presentation, I've been asked to talk about how can African and Middle Eastern business schools implement sustainable practices. My plan is that I'm going to talk first about how we at the university, the AUC, we do sustainability, then the School of Business, and then half of my presentation is going to be talking about, in general, are we all doing it right or not? And what are the issues or the challenges? Where are we amiss? Okay. Now, so when you talk about AUC is a university that actually publishes a carbon footprint report, which is very, 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 I would say, progressive for a university in the Middle East. COP27 is going to be held in Egypt, in Sharm el-Sheikh. So we have what is called a climate change initiative. And it's about 5 major focus areas. And there is an interesting focus on the just transition. Now, just to sort of be brief, and I don't want to sort of bother you with too much details, let me go to the School of Business. We were very early starters in UN Prime. We were actually using UN Prime as a vehicle or a mechanism to promote sustainability. Now we do other vehicles. We are also members of the BOP Lab Network, the Global Business School Network, Business and Human Rights, etc. Part of the UN Prime, we got from the network something called Sustainability Literacy Test, SALI test. Anybody working with sustainability in a business school would know what is Sustainability Literacy Test, SALI test. Now, for us, what we're using it for, to enforce students before graduation, they'll have to take the test and pass it. Now, if you've taken the test, the focus really here is on education, not assessment. Now, SDGs, we're rolling it across the curriculum with the bigger responsible business theme. We'd also, in addition to infusing the concept in many courses, we also have specific courses like business ethics, social entrepreneurship, business and society, etc. Community-based learning is a very focused theme in the whole university, not just the business school. And the idea here, in addition to pedagogy, that you get students to sort of see the real world and stuff like that, you're also trying to teach them how to engage effectively with society. We also have many research centers working on social sustainability issues. JPAL, we have a center here. A is access to knowledge for development. There is also Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, as well as the Gerhart Center. There are many students' clubs and competitions around sustainability. Let me show you some examples. this is a competition. This is a, a webinar series that we've started at the Gerhart Center. We started it with the April 2020, so right after the lockdown. And the purpose here was to sort of promote concepts that we thought it was very important for social impact, was very important for sustainability, but are not mainstream. Let me show you some of the speakers. I mean, you could probably recognize most of them. I mean, Jeffrey Sachs, Andy Mintzberg, Colin Mayer, Bill Drayton, Jacqueline Novogratz, Kate Rayworth, etc. The webinar is an hour, and we try to do it in a time which is, we started by doing it in the afternoon, but then we switched to at night as the people start going back to work. Now, this is another focus really on sustainability now. I mean, John Ilkington is on the board of the Gerhart Center, and he's the person who coined the expression triple bottom line. Michael Lennox, University of Virginia, and he talks about decarbonization, etc. Robert Pollin had an interesting book with Naomi Chomsky about sustainability. And Fullerton is one of the leading figures about regenerative economies. Okay. Now, COP27, we started to talk more about climate change and net zero for COP27, and we got some brilliant speakers to talk about this. Now, this is a competition we've done with the Oxford Said School of Business. It's called Map the System. The idea here is that you're getting students to use system thinking approaches to model a social problem and try to sort of get basic understanding of it and maybe develop some solutions for it. One of our teams actually, undergraduate, won first mention in the competition. Okay. This is an example of an activity we've done. The business, AUC School of Business have a business forum every March. And last March, we had a session with Prime Chapter Africa, and it was focused on just transition for Africa. And you can see, I mean, all of those players are operating around sustainability, around climate change in Africa. All those webinars, by the way, and meetings and panels are recorded and are stored for people to listen to it later on. Okay. So this is what we're doing, and I'm sure you're going to find lots of overlap with most business schools. I mean, deans would go to dean's meeting, they exchange ideas, we all copy each other's. Prime, there are few organizations that are dominant, and so you're going to find there are lots of commonality. Now, the question we have to ask ourselves, are we all doing it right? The reason I'm putting the all is that I'm not addressing here the AUC specifically. I'm talking in general. We need to ask ourselves, are we creating really social change agents? Do we create graduates who can engage with their communities? Helmi, I think, talked about the bubble effect. We're living in a bubble. There is also a very interesting phenomena also, which is the top-bottom mindset. I mean, our graduates will have to, I mean, especially when they go consulting, they tend to think, I'm educated, I'm better educated, I can go to a community, and I can land with a parachute, and I can show them the road to salvation. I'll talk more about this. This is a brilliant thing that I had from the paper is about the Indian new national education policy. When I read this was really, I mean, an eye-opener. The authors, and I cite where I got it from, it's from Science, but anyway, they said a fundamental challenge for Indian education policy is to reorient the education system from one focused on sorting top talent, identifying top talent students, to one that is focused on human development that can improve learning for all. Think about it. Education is about what? You really, from the very beginning, from even KG until you graduate, until you go to work, it's really about sorting the top talent. It's looking for the gold medals. medalist. We're not trying to spread sports, everybody playing sports. We're not talking about human development that can improve learning for all. Now, let's just reflect. I mean, for me, the purpose of education at large, the purpose of education in the end is really to create development, economic development, social development in the area you're in. Now, mind you, still business schools operate with a mindset of investment, with more of a Milton Friedman kind of a mindset, which is very different than development. We preach about exclusiveness, whether we don't do it in a direct way, but everything we do is about exclusiveness. Development is about inclusiveness. We focus on verticals. We teach students verticals. Now, development is really holistic. It's across. Now, so what I'm saying is business education is elitist. Look at the way we do entrepreneurship, for example. The way we do it. And by the way, until very recently, people in entrepreneurship would tell you entrepreneurship based on need is not entrepreneurship. So if a little lady in some suburban or some rural area opens a small business and she can barely float on water, and she's doing this because, of course, she needs the money. No, they didn't consider this as entrepreneurship. So it's extremely exclusive. Now, the other question we need to ask is, are our students engaged with society? Perhaps, but I've seen many, I mean, in general, I mean, the business environment. I mean, most of the output of entrepreneurship, for example, startups, is mobiles, is smartphones. And then they tell you the first thing that everybody has a smartphone. Well, excuse me, in developing countries, this is not the case. And even if they have smartphones, they don't have internet services that goes with it. What is our definition of innovation? You're going to find that innovation, technology in general, or innovation, is really about something that's going to be patented, but it will have a patent, and hopefully will bring a large amount of money. And most probably, you're going to find, look at most innovations, it does not serve base of the pyramid, with few exceptions. We don't celebrate frugal innovation. We don't celebrate grassroots innovation because they tend to be more pragmatic. They tend to be more open source. And that's, again, what development and sustainability are horizontal. They are not vertical, so they require a holistic and multidisciplinary approach. By the way, this is not just unique for them. I mean, if you're going to teach your students to do corporate turnarounds, for example, this is by definition, you cannot look at it from an accounting or a finance or an operations or a strategy point of view. You have to look at it across. So it's really more of a problem-based, more of a holistic approach, more of a system kind of a thinking. What is the purpose of education? Now, you're going to hear a lot of people telling you that you need to connect education, the graduates that you have, with the job market. There is a very high risk for this. For me, the purpose of education is to create good athletes who can play any sport. I'm talking about flexibility. I'm talking about people who could change, could relearn, could do creative thinking, not people who are fitted to the nth degree for a specific job. Anybody who has done statistics or has done modeling or data science, we call this overfitting. Overfitting. And it is bad. It is bad because you take some of the variability as part of the model, which shouldn't be the case. And also, by overfitting, you're not leaving some space to move for future perturbations or future dynamics. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about Africa and what we don't do. We really have to decolonize. There are lots of heritage in Africa and Middle East. And I'll tell you one example. When you talk about endowment, for example, endowment is really a modern form of Islamic waqf. Now, most people working with endowments don't talk about it this way. So there is a missing African narrative, and the missing African narrative has been suppressed. Philanthropy, for example, is a foreign name in Africa. I mean, in African, we talk about African giving. Even philanthropy. Philanthropy is a very Western mindset, and it celebrates few individuals with deep pockets. Interesting enough, when you look at how much money is paid, those individuals with deep pockets only contribute to 30% of the pie. The rest are people like you and I, or maybe even poorer, that they pay some money, not much. I'm not going to pay 10 million. I can pay maybe 100 pounds, but there is a million like me or 2 million like me. So this is the idea. I mean, some of the people in WITS, for example, they call this the poor philanthropist. But anyway, interesting enough, and again, we do this in the business school all the time, we forget about the masses, we forget about the impact of the masses, and then we talk about few deep pockets who contributes only to the 30% of the pie. Role of women in society and in businesses. This is very evident in Africa. Go to just any market in sub-Saharan Africa or even anywhere. The women play a dramatic role, whether in their own families, their own communities, their own economies. Governance, for example. Africa, before colonization, used to have an interesting form of governance. Yes, it was tribal. And by the way, there are still some of it in many areas, Ashanti, in Ghana, for example, and it is working fine. It is working fine. The problem is that we started to borrow some of the concepts from Westerners, and I have no problem with picking good ideas, right? But you have to understand the culture, you have to understand what is there, and you cannot just wipe it out. Do we have enough case studies from Africa? There are many brilliant things that are happening, and I think the role of the business schools is to celebrate case studies from Africa with an African narrative. COP27 is in Egypt, as I said, and the just transition to net zero should be Africa is an energy-hungry country. And in some of the countries that would have prospects for development, they're really relying on fossil fuel, whether it's natural gas like Egypt, Algeria, or even gasoline like Nigeria, the Equatorial Guinea, etc. Now, if you want to tell those guys, don't do fossil fuel, you really have to talk with them about a just transition to get to this. And that's probably a global responsibility. SDGs. Are we doing it right? Now, you're probably going to find that when we report SDGs, most of us, we cherry pick. We say, I do SDG 1, I work in food, I do SDG 2, I work in health, I do whatever, which is fine as an individual, but a school would have to stress that the SDGs are in totality. This is like value. You cannot really divide it. You really have to look at the SDGs as a code of ethics. You cannot say, I'm going to do 1 and I'm going to spoil 10. You really have to have a minimum acceptable performance across, and then I might excel in 1 or 2. If you think about it from a code of ethics point of view, then this becomes clear. We rarely talk about SDGs as a human rights. There is a very strong wave of thinking of business as a major contributor to either human rights violations or human rights successes. Another interesting thing, when you look at the SDG is very lagging in ecosystem governance. Governance is really confined. You could think of 16 and 17 as they have some elements of governance, but not the complete picture. Most of the problems we have in our societies are about ecosystem governance. Corruption is because of ecosystem governance, etc. So what do we need to do? The change that's going to happen, we need to start democratizing some of the concepts that we teach. We need to start celebrating community-led initiatives. We have to start democratizing wealth. Yesterday, for example, one of the webinars in the Gerhart webinar series, we brought Campbell Harvey from Duke University, and he was talking about decentralized finance. Interesting enough, when you do decentralized finance, and this could be done because of the blockchain and the cryptocurrency and etc., it actually allows you to provide finance in a much more effective way. So thus you enable it to a wider range of audience. The problem, of course, is that the intermediate, the people in between are making money and going to resist that, and they are in control. The concept of leadership, is it democratic or is it again elitist or just for the few? In my view, schools of business can play a major role in changing the mindset, in creating at least a mindset for some of the graduates who eventually could go out to change their communities. Once you have enough of a critical mass, then becomes a culture, becomes a movement that drives cultures. I thank you for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Ali. Now we will move on to John Foster-Pedley. John Foster-Pedley, the page is now yours.
I'm coming before you panic. Just give me a second.
No worries.
Just give me a moment. Just setting up my presentation here. And I need to share, excuse me. Okay, I'm having a slight trouble with sharing here. I'll get back to you in just a second. Give me a moment. I would say while I'm setting this up that I've really enjoyed the last two presentations, and you know, both were fantastic for me, and this last one was very much resonating on such a deep level, so many really useful factors for business schools. So I'd just like to say thank you for that. I'm now going to set up this presentation. I'm going to share it, and hopefully this will work. You can see that, right? And still in non-presentation mode, and I'm just setting it up there. So can you see that as a presentation now?
Just waiting for it to come through in presentation mode. You can see your screen, it's just still showing the PowerPoint.
Okay, well, I'll just do it again then. This is a slight trouble I've had before with this.
It's okay.
It's probably better. Share that. And now let's see if I can set this up for you. So
yeah, so we can see,
yeah,
we can see your we can see the whole slide deck as well, and the next slide. So it's not showing just the one page.
Okay, just try this. How's that?
That's the same for me. Is it what happens if you press that button down there, John, by the you know, it says slide 1 to 3, just to the left of it? Is that a presentation button to the left? A little bit more. What's that button there?
No, that's
no, that's true.
I'm so sorry. I've just had a bit of a trouble. I'm working on 3 screens. So it won't be a second.
It's okay.
I'll try.
3 screens, that's there.
Yeah. That's annoying. Forgive me, everyone.
No worries, yeah. I find 2 screens hard enough sometimes.
Yeah. I had this all set up a second ago. I'm going to try again. See how that looks. Is that better?
I can't see anything. You can only just see yourself. Oh, actually, that's perfect.
Thank you very much. I'm so sorry, everybody.
No worries, John.
Fine, I'm going to try and talk on a completely different tack. What I just found in the last presentation was an extremely well-organized approach, which is very, very thoughtful and high level about how to approach this topic from well-organized and globally integrated, but also socially and philosophically challenging perspective, which I think is exactly what we need to do. I've been teaching business schools for a long time, less recently where I've been building a business school in Africa. And from the teaching perspective, I'm particularly interested in what is the output of the individuals who are coming through, rather than the institutional associations and some of the frameworks. And the thing that's been challenging me for a long time is how we teach and what is to be the output. Because if the output is to be well-considered organizational structures and very high-level initiatives, that's fantastic. But the individuals coming through and moving into organizations themselves, not only do they need a broad and high-level framework about how to structure their organizations, I think they need a personal challenge. And what is their role? What is the role of a business school? And what is my role? I have a sense that there is an implicit conservatism, I may be wrong here, within business schools, and I'll talk more about that. And that conservatism is the nature of their institutional forms, what they've been created to do, who supports them, who they are supporting, the world of business and government that they are supplying, if you like, and the world of business and government that quite often is creating and supporting them. And often there are inherent complex power dynamics within that, not only geopolitical, but political within each country or even blocks, and even within academia themselves. So I just want to talk a little bit about, what activism may mean, whether there's a place for it in business education. I'm not saying what I'm going to say now is right. I'm just going to open a conversation, if you like, and see where that goes. So we have a statement at Henley Business School in Africa, which is, and it's not just a mission statement, it is our guiding principle that works on every level of what we do. And that is, we build the people who build the businesses, and obviously organizations that build Africa. And there's a logic and a causality behind that. We can build institutions, but people make institutions. The way people think and what they believe in and what they believe they're capable of really forms their output. And we believe those people should be able to build businesses and create new value, create new forms of economies, if you like, that are actually going to build Africa. And in the process of that, address the very inherent issues of colonialization, its residues, how that still influences everybody, whether you're the colonizer or colonized too, and how those organizations, or how those things feed into governance, ethics, how we handle corruption, what we believe corruption is and isn't, and how those things together can build, in this case, Africa, but of course the world. And I'm going to just start with a few suggestions and ideas, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of frameworks, and then I'm going to dive into some thoughts about ethics and activism as a conversation piece, if you like. So the first sort of artifact I'd like to show here is this Gini coefficient, which is the Lorenz curve, which shows the difference between rich and poor and how wealth is distributed across, in this case, the national economy. South Africa has the worst in the world. It's the worst, the most unequal distribution of resources and finance in the world, and it's been getting worse. And I know that most of the countries in Africa are not doing particularly well in this respect either, in fact, fairly badly, as they are in many other places in the world. But the legacy of this is, it means that good people who are smart are trapped. The majority of people don't have access to education or resources, but these are smart people inherently, whether we believe they're not. Education doesn't create intelligence, it amplifies it, it challenges it, it builds it. But these people are inherently intelligent, and sometimes people don't think that. In fact, the thought that they're not is a legacy of colonialism and racism. So we have to do something about this, and I believe that business schools should be very active in that in many ways, and so do many other people, of course. The next thing I want to show is something that we talked on, that Ali talked about in his wonderful series of seminars, where he talked about Kate Raworth and Donut economics. And I would like to propose this as one of the models we might use to construct our education going forward. And the idea here is that there are two boundaries. There's the ecological ceiling, which we mustn't transgress. And if our activities create climate change, air pollution, chemical pollution, damage our communal global living environment, the air we all breathe, the water we all engage in, the climate we all live in, then we can't allow our activities to do that. Equally, there's a social foundation beneath which we should not and must not transgress, but which our Gini coefficient has just showed we are desperately transgressing in South Africa and in many other places in the world. And I believe it is our duty, this is my belief, in business schools to work on making sure that doesn't happen. So that social foundation is a transgression. Now, I just want to say this is an artifact of the mind, the donut economic model. And these models are very, very influential. In fact, many people create simplifying or really dumb-sizing models. I read a complexity theorist called David Snowden criticizing McKinsey's propensity to change the thinking of CEOs with oversimplified models recently. However, good models can really work. And so the safe space for us all to live in is our activities must stay within that. And frankly, business schools are about creating economic activity and social change and how we make wealth and distribute it in the world. And therefore, I think our accountability and responsibility needs to be taken very seriously. And I would argue that maybe we could take a model like this and overlay it on all our activities in a business school, every course we do, and question each course and each activity and each governance system as whether we are actually part of this or whether we are actually doing that, which is creating enormous damage. So that's my first thought, is maybe we can take a framework like this, and it could be a useful framework of thinking to apply to our business schools and to the education creations we make, which are programs and the initiatives we have, and see whether it ticks a box for meeting this, as well as the SDGs, of course, but this in a sense is a slightly different way of looking at them, which I find useful. Which brings me to the next point I'd like to touch on, is that morality and ethics in business schools. Now, classically, in my experience, when we want to do ethics at a business school, we pull somebody in and we teach ethics. But there's a difference between ethics and morality as far as I understand it. And I think that, you know, morals are our own principle, ethics are the social system, and often the laws are creating that. And so how do we improve ethics and morality, not just in the school, but in the output of the school, which are the people going out there, without being patronizing or business school explaining or any other sort of toxic way of explaining? So for me, I ask the question, who are we as business schools? What are we? On the left, you've got like a ball bearing in a bowl. You know, it's like you put a ball in a bowl and you put it up to the tip of the bowl and it just goes down to the bottom and stays there. That's a stable system. And an unstable system is one that's changing that status quo. In fact, if you move that ball bearing on the top, it will accelerate downwards. So it's actually very unstable. It's not neutrally unstable. It is accelerating unstable. And I would ask the question, do most of our business schools, whether we like to believe it or not, actually act as a thermostat, maintaining rules and policies? Are we making change happen fast enough? And our business schools actually change accelerators, evolving rules and policies. Now let's look at a little bit further then for people who believe that our planet is getting to the limit of livability and that we are beyond the point of conservative and gentle change. And that, in fact, we ought to be breaking laws. And here are some quotes here about fighting climate change and breaking the law. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. What is civil disobedience? Is it legitimate to break laws? Are business schools in any way able to have this conversation, or are their corporate sponsors and their government sponsors, just by the nature of who they are, only too eager sometimes, whether tacitly or explicitly, to rein back on that change, whereas the dynamic threat to us in the environment requires that we accelerate that change? And are we actually living in a safe space in our business schools, or should we create a global outreach and start taking ourselves seriously as global change agents? And here, just for our kind of conversation, 8 people that you all know who've broken the law to change the world. Nelson Mandela, obviously. Roxana Saberi, the Iranian journalist. She was in prison, broke laws for speaking out for women's rights, etc., and change within her context. Susan Bromwell Anthony, an early activist for women's rights in the suffragette movement, also in prison. Rosa Parks, you will know of well, in prison too, arrested for trying to change laws about race. Martin Luther King broke laws. In fact, I've got some more quotes. Mohandas Gandhi, Liu Xiaobo, if that's pronounced right, in China, protesting against the nature the Chinese government, its approach towards rights and knowledge rights, etc. And Wangari Maathai, you'll know very well, you know, an ecological environmentalist in Kenya, challenged, arrested, but ultimately winning a Nobel Prize for her change. What are we as business schools? Are we actually scarily conservative but don't want to face that, or are we constructively able to make the change? And the first thing I want to show here is think about what is the difference between legality and legitimacy. Some laws we face are legal and legitimate. But some things that are legal, we consider as illegitimate. And organizations create their own illegitimacy and break climate laws and environmental laws and other social norms, you know, because of their own internal changes. You'll see in so many companies recently falling across that. There are legitimate things which are also illegal. You know, we legitimately jump red lights here in South Africa and break the speed limits. But how do we manage that? So understanding what is legitimate, what is driven by our norms and our belief and what are laws is an important way to start thinking. And we overlay climate and sustainability on that. So what is illegal but is legitimate in climate change? So let's look at that box. What is illegal but legitimate? And Martin Luther King said there are two types of law, just and unjust. He will be the first to advocate obeying just laws. And in fact, it says we have a moral duty as well, a societal duty, but we also have a moral responsibility, a societal duty to disobey unjust laws. And St. Augustine, and I'm sure there are even better quotes from different religious foundations, that an unjust law is no law. So an understanding here is that common law and action is not criminal. Certainly in the UK, this is from Kate Raworth. The act is needed to avoid inevitable and irreparable evil, but no more should be done than is reasonably necessary for the purpose to be achieved, and the evil inflicted must not be disproportionate to the evil avoided. So if we look at Extinction Rebellion, for example, which has built its whole movement on this, why must I break the law? They have this metaphor of a train or a ship, and if you're a passenger on a ship that's going to hit the rocks and everybody's going to die, the passenger raises the alarm, but the ship doesn't change. The passengers are then morally bound to do what they can do to prevent the ship hitting the rocks. And that is the rationale behind Extinction Rebellion. The science is clear, they say. We're definitely heading towards catastrophic climate change. We're feeling it. And the government or the broader society at large is mainly ignoring. We're not changing the dial quick enough. And therefore, we have to do something about it. So my final slide, and it's just a quick one here, and I want to raise the point here for business schools. Where should we sit here? Of course, being seen to be the provocateurs, the activists, is very uncomfortable. In fact, many people would say it's absolutely not what business schools would do. But I would question that now. And so the final thing is, what sort of ethics do we need to deal with? You know, there's three types, and many more. There's what we call virtue ethics. You know, how do you live your life? What kind of person do you want to be? Do you want to build a world where, you know, our children collectively are going to grow up in a boiling planet with fewer species and less opportunity within them? Do you want to do that? And what's the cost to you if you don't want to live that life? What are you going to transgress? And what are you going to maintain tacitly or openly? And consequential is that ethic. Is this good? Is my behavior having on it? Is it good? And you'll see the debate here. This is the Trumpian versus Democratic Party. What is good? And they would have very different views. And then deontological ethics. Is it right? What are my ethical principles and reasons telling me I should do? And I would say that if we want to really engage with sustainability in business schools, we have to not just study and talk about this. We have to integrate these thoughts like DNA, like a woven color, into the heart of our activities in business schools, and be prepared to challenge some of our most sacred thoughts to create something that is even stronger, even better, even more fit for purpose. It's something that we will be proud of because we made a real change that helped people moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, John. Some very interesting points there, especially around activism. And I've definitely got some questions I will be asking after, but as we come on to the last presentation, that will be Dr. Jane Usher from Milpark. Jane, floor is yours.
Thank you, Ben, very much. And thank you to the last three panelists. Very exciting and interesting thoughts that you've provided for us. And so I think from my perspective, it's great to be the last presenter, because I've now been picking up on different things that everybody has been talking about. And I'm going to mention some of them in my talk. You'll notice I haven't got slides because that's very complicated for me at this stage. So I thought I would just take through some of our thinking from Milpark Business School specifically, as well as business schools in general, on the thinking about sustainability, and then some specific areas that we are involved in as Milpark Business School. And so when Ben said, talk on sustainability, I thought, wow, there's so much you can talk about, because it's an incredibly broad term and it means different things to different people. And, from environmental sustainability to economic, social, and so on. And I think this is where the Sustainable Development Goals come into focus, because they do cover the facets of sustainability, and they can direct us and give us some movement towards a holistic look at improving various aspects of sustainability. And again, there are many definitions of sustainability, but the one that I really like is what I've seen from Santander. And it says there, sustainability consists of fulfilling the needs of current generations without compromising the needs of future generations, while ensuring a balance between economic growth and environmental care and social well-being. And I think those elements are very important for us to focus on as business schools, because we do need to stimulate economic growth. However, not at, as has been said before, the detriment to the environment and social. So we need to be well aware of these elements that are part of sustainability. Again, I feel that business schools have a very important role to play in promoting the awareness of, and thereafter finding innovative ways to enable their students to embrace specific aspects of sustainability. I think locally and globally, we as business schools and higher education institutions as well are ideally placed to make a positive impact through our graduates. And then again, just thinking, and I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but to what Jonathan said, we need to look at our graduates. Who are the people, the individuals that are going through our systems? Are they the change agents that we need? Are they the activists that we need? So we do need to take a hard look at ourselves still. And we've been criticized in the past of producing graduates who are not especially seen as ethical, individualistic, profits at all costs. This was seen through the financial crisis and various scandals that have been happening, so locally and as well as globally. So I think we need to change that perception, but through our behaviors, and it will be through our graduates who pass through our doors. And again, we are also still seen, as Ali alluded to, as exclusive and elitist. So we've got a conundrum here where we need to be working with we should be working with our communities, making sure that we really understand what is happening in our surrounds, yet, are we really doing that if we're that elitist? People aspire to come to a business school to perhaps get a qualification that will get them a high paying job, and then that's that, and that's all. So we really need to look at our reason for being. So and again, just referring to what Ali said, the SDGs, we do need to see them as a whole. And I think it's quite interesting that he said that they are values. So you don't do one thing that's going to completely undermine another 3 to 4 areas in the SDG. So I think for me, that's also been a bit of a mind shift or something else to think about. I would suggest that business schools in South Africa do address sustainability after having looked at curricula of the business schools in South Africa specifically. And there are schools who are really well known for their focus on sustainability. Our schools do have it in their modules, in their MBA and postgraduate modules, and it is threaded throughout many of the schools' curricula. What I am wondering is, again, are we doing enough when we talk about it's in our curricula, but is it in our beings? Do we actually walk the talk as faculty and as even our operational aspects? Are we looking at sustainability? Do we give everybody plastic water bottles, just for example, or how do we even look at that? How do we use our electricity? But I'm digressing a little bit. So I'd like to speak specifically about what we're currently doing at Milpark Business School. We do have a module on business ethics and corporate governance. And then we also have a module specifically on social responsibility and environmental management. All of our postgrad students and MBA students do this, and it is one of the foundation modules that underpins all the modules that come after that. And what we're wanting is that thread through the rest of the modules, where we then can hone in on the other SDGs that work specifically or fit nicely with those SDGs. Just to give a bit of context around the specific module and why we do it and what the focus is that it examines the social, ethical, and environmental issues faced by businesses and all other kinds of organizations. We want to ensure that students have a theoretical understanding, and then that they are able to analyze corporate social responsibility issues. Are they able to really understand what is going on in terms of CSR issues, initiatives, drivers, responses? We want them to start thinking critically, and this is what in one of the modules that we encourage this. They need to also be able to understand that current forms of economic activity are either unsustainable or at least will be subject to a wider raft of ethical, social, environmental constraints in the future. So they need to be outward looking, and they need to be awake and seeing what's happening in their communities and their localities. So it considers, as I said, the social, ethical, and environmental issues to the extent of what the constraints and opportunities of enterprises are. However, the most important element in this specific module that I think is key is that students need to work in their communities. They need to identify a charity within their community who is willing to work with them. We have found that could be a problem because charities don't want people coming and going and telling them what to do. That's not the point of this. Students get to learn about what the actual needs of the charity are and where the charity may require help. So it's definitely what we don't want to happen, and was also said before, is, students go in and they're going to tell everybody what to do because they're the clever ones, they're the people doing the MBAs. No. Our students need to learn from the charities what is happening, what is required, and then find ways of assisting them to ensure that they are sustainable, that they can receive funding, and that they can continue to empower and have an impact within their local community. So they also need to identify a company whose CSR strategy aligns with the charities, bring those parties together, and then they do a group presentation and, you know, so that we can see the findings, how they've assisted the charities and the communities as well. Again, as I said, we promote the relationship with the charity, and it's gratifying that students are keeping on with those relationships. We've seen students who have graduated and they still go back to the charity. So that relationship is there because, again, with community engagement and community work, to be like parachuted in, as you said, and then you leave people high and dry. You need to work in those communities to understand what is happening and how you can properly work with each other. Anyway, so that's one of the small ways that we are, I think, contributing to the curriculum to improve sustainabilities in local communities. And again, it's the weaving of all of the SDGs through the rest of the curriculum so that each module can focus on areas that would work for them, such as SDG number 5, which relates to gender equality. That can go through many modules as a focus, such as people management, leadership, and even in the accounting modules, you know. So that's where one of our areas, but this is from, as I said, the curriculum standpoint. A newer initiative that we are also part of, and Ali spoke about this earlier, is the SULI test, which is the sustainability literacy test, which raises awareness and learning. So the multiple choice test of 30 questions is a tool to help students to self-assess what they know about economic, social, and environmental sustainability and the challenges that are facing the world. And so, as I said earlier, we need to start ensuring that we are part of the positive movements within sustainability, because I think also, as John mentioned, things are heating up. We talk about the SDGs. We don't have long to actually achieve everything. So, you know, we as business schools perhaps need to ignite and start moving fast and really working with getting our students to be more change agents and activists. I like that idea. I think it's possibly one we're going to adopt, John, if you don't mind. So the SULI test also says it's the responsibility of all our business leaders to consider sustainable development into their practices, not only because our planet and society are urging for responsible and restorative action. You know, have we gone too far? Can we turn the tide back at all? But because sustainability knowledge is increasingly a requirement for employers, for investors, and other business stakeholders. So it is really, really an important aspect that we need to be focusing on. So the international initiative from SULI test really it's a standardized awareness test. It is endorsed by the United Nations and many academic institutions and companies around the world. More than 80 countries use it. So I think it is gaining momentum, and hopefully it will gain even more momentum. And again, students don't need to be experts. They need to see where they are. It's an awareness aspect that enables awareness and learning, and for the students and for us as faculty to reflect on where and what students are learning and you know what needs to be done. So from this project that we're implementing, the data that we gather, we would like to be then incorporating into our curriculum going forward as a continuous basis. Because again, as business schools, we need to be moving quickly. I think, I'm not sure if it was who said before, it might have been Ali, we need graduates who can think critically, who are aware, not who fit the job market, because the job market might not be, well, is not the same, and it won't be the same in 5 years' time. So we are doing a disservice to any of our students if we keep on the same trajectory, I feel. So on another global level, we're involved with a partnership with Globe Ethics, and I've been part of putting together a publication on how higher education institutions globally are working towards including the SDGs in their schools. And hopefully the publication should be available this October or November. And we'll definitely let people know about it. As far as I know, there's no charge for it, but I don't want to go on record saying that. Ooh. Then the last area that I just want to highlight as well. So we are looking at sustainability and areas from the curriculum, from community engagements within faculty. And then our Dean, Dr. Kobus Oosthuizen, is doing his part as well. He's a member of the chapter steering committee for the Africa chapter of Prime. And then he also represents the South African Business Schools Association on the ESG exchange. So activities are happening in different realms of the business school to encourage and incorporate responsible management education, change ideas, which include the sustainability issues into the business school and to educational institutions. So I think, again, it's incredibly important. We have a vital role to play in this, and business schools are really, as I said before, ideally placed to influence, to change, to have a direct influence on our graduates and change their mindsets, because it is a transformational process when you do a postgraduate degree. And we need to be incorporating these areas, questioning all the time, and not just in the curriculum, but in our ways of being and in our ways of thinking. So that's my short spiel, and open to questions. And again, thanks to the previous three presenters, because I was able to latch onto some of the things you said, which I think were really very interesting and exciting going forward. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Dr. Jane, and thank you again to all the panelists for your great presentations. Now we're going to start the Q&A, so if I could ask all the panelists to put their cameras on. Nice, nice. So we've received 2 questions. One of them was already answered by Helmi during the conversation. And then Simeon's actually had another question for yourself, John. So the question is, who defines what is good? And I think this is, and that's just the question. I think it's a very good open question about, yeah, who says what is right. So I guess from my idea of what this question is, you know, especially with Extinction Rebellion, you know, they might have seen a lot of the data and the science and they think that's right, so they're pushing forward on that. So I guess the question is, who are the activists always right, or is it, or can it be more defined easily?
I lived and worked in France for a while, and I was fascinated by the difference between the idea of what a fact is in my upbringing in Britain originally, although I've been in Africa for 30 years now, and in France. In my upbringing, a fact is a fact. It's immutable. It's indisputable. And in France, a fact is a beginning for further philosophic exploration, if I could just polarize it. And the trouble is that who defines facts is that's a point these days, isn't it? Who does? But who defines good? Now that's something. My kids were really good at defining what was good when they were growing up. My teenage daughter at 18 is absolutely perfectly good at defining good. I think maybe we get more sophisticated in understanding what is good, and we mediate it without even knowing, according to our needs and whatever. And then perhaps what wisdom is, early or late, is what becomes is the source of defining what is good. And this is an inner hunt all your life. What is good? We seek to have good defined for us, but there is no escape from the internal challenge you have all your life to see and be what is good, with inevitable and catastrophic failures all the way along that path, I would argue. So I would think that if you want to understand, I think you must have a skeptical mind, not a cynical one. You don't need to have the sort of bland optimism of Candide in that famous French novel, you know, what was the name of that novel? Candide. It was by Voltaire, I think. But you've also got to just be continually hunting it. But you have to follow what makes sense to you. You can't be in awe of the great professors, the great intellectuals, the great activists, or the great voices. You can't let go of that. Trust your heart and think what's going to be good for your kids is where I would start with.
Makes sense.
I think Ali and Helmi and Jane will have a far more sophisticated answer than me.
I think just latching on to again, I'm just latching on to what you're saying. I think the wisdom part of that is really important. You know, and context, because we need to understand, the person's context, what, as to, what is good, what would that be? And then looking at that, it may be slightly different for different people, depending on where your context is. But I think the wisdom and the what we look at phronesis, that also then comes into play, where you need to be asking questions all the time, because what you actually at one stage in your life thought was good, you've defined it as this is good behavior. So putting your plastic in the dustbin is good, it's good behavior. Is it now? So that continual questioning from an internal, an individual level, and then discussing it as well, getting other people's perceptions. So I think there are those terms in life which are extremely difficult to put into a box. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I would say that defining good depends on the system of values we are evolving in. Just to give you an example, when I teach, fraud, for instance, in accounting, actually there are some common values that are there that defines what is good, what is not. Getting a kickback from your supplier or client, this is something bad. You see, so the system of values, the standards, the social values, the standards that we have, they help to define what is good and what is bad. Obviously, the question is more complex than that, and we don't want to get into philosophical debate, John, in here, because we won't end it.
Okay, Ali, do you have any comments on that?
I mean, again, I don't want to get into a philosophical discussion, but I remember there was a quote. I think he was an American judge, and he was asked the question, and I don't recall what was the question, but it was something like, what is prostitution? What is something like that? And his answer was very simple. I know one when I see it. We all know. I mean, in many aspects, we all know. I mean, sometimes we just sort of let yourself down and ignore it. And sometimes you'll have people, I mean, majority of people going behind something which is wrong. I mean, the amount of people behind it is not an indication of wrong or right. But I mean, I think his point is interesting. His point is that inside most of us, we know what's wrong and what's right.
Definitely. Yeah, I know what you mean. We could go into a very deep conversation about what is good, but yeah, we'll try. Oh, Jane's got something to say.
I just wanted that also, I think Ellie comes back to looking at the different type of laws that we've got, whether they're just or unjust. You know, can we take that to good as well? And so I think that's also a starting point, or something we could, that we need to be looking at individually all the time. The type of laws, are they good, just, or are they laws that are unjust and clearly not good?
John?
Yeah, I think when I was younger, I would be averse to thinking anything positive about activism in the way I was thinking of it. I would see it as the people breaking the system that perhaps I was imbued in and didn't see well enough. But now I think activism in the right way is extremely good. It's very, I mean, in the wrong way, you're dancing when you're doing it. But, you know, being philosophical is what business schools and professors are good at. Activism, maybe not. And maybe the two need to start linking hands a lot more going forward. To me, that sounds good.
Yeah, how do you think? Because I want to during your presentation, John, the first thing I was thinking of is, you know, it'd be great if a business school could promote activism, but then how could they realistically? So how could a school sometimes do that without upsetting the shareholders or anyone who owns the school? Because you're kind of creating those rage against the machines, which, you know, is a force for good. But I can see why some people, you know, like Extinction Rebellion is a perfect example. You know, some people were moaning they couldn't drive to work because they were in the middle of the motorway, which is a small price to pay for climate change.
Business schools have different duties. One duty is to keep your shareholders happy. Now, if your shareholders are part of a system that's damaging your environment, or if you're not challenging Bain or McKinsey or those people who've all been held up in global challenges because of their practices in developing countries, you know, which are causing them global bans, a massive effect on their business. If you're not creating people who can go into those organizations and challenge them, how are you helping your client or your stakeholder? So the point is that business schools need to be progressive and also challenging the end, and not in order to their shareholders, in case they collude with practices that are not going to allow those stakeholders to do good and actually to damage them, as we have seen. And that's what Jane was saying, and others were saying, that what the big criticism of business schools was in the past. We were not taking a stance. We had speech, but we didn't have voice.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So, because I thought it was very interesting what you were saying, Jane, about how you incorporate it into school through the correct me if I'm wrong, business ethics and corporate governance modules, which I thought was a really good idea of pairing the students with charities in the local area to show them what's going on and to see, you know, the charities as what they actually are. And I guess I just got a few questions about that module, which I think is a very good idea. You know, how long has it been going on for, and how many students are paired up with those local charities?
So this has been part of our curriculum since 2016. So we've had a lot of students working with charities and moving through that. So I can't tell you the exact number, but if we look at, you know, say 50 a year and it's still carrying on, that's, and obviously we should be measuring that impact, you know, proper, nice quantitative study, which I'll leave that to somebody else to do because quants are not my favorite. So Kobus will have to do something like that. But yeah, so that has been going on for a long time. And what we found, and actually one of our chief commercial officer was doing, she did her dissertation. She wasn't studying through us because she wasn't allowed to, on the impact that module had on people and how, you know, it lasted, those relationships lasted. And that was the module that really touched their hearts. as well, and because it's such an emotional module, and it through, and you know, that is where the changes in from a personal perspective came in, as well as in and realizing the importance of communities and giving back and trying to make a stand and make a change. So that was the reasoning behind that module specifically.
Yeah, because I can see the module being really helpful to not say like feel activism, but it will help the students to see what's actually going on. And then, you know, if they're working with a charity that is, you know, trying to put a stop, let's say, fracking or oil, then they can actually work with that charity they're working through the business school to be more of an activist. So it's almost the business schools encouraging it in that sense as well, in some kind of a different way. So I can see how that, yeah, how that can pay well and how it's more touching for the students. And you know, the charities you work with, are you constantly bringing on more charities for students to pick and choose?
So what one of the onus is on the students to find a suitable charity. So we don't give them, they need to go to the charities. We look at who they are. So in that way, we get a diverse connection with charities from, you know, who deal with education. We've been working with a charity in Hillbrow here, who she deals and she helps girls that have been trafficked, and that is that was mind-blowing to everybody. So it's a whole different range of charities that they bring to us. So we get them to do the hard work, so to say, to bring charities on board. Yeah,
I see. And it's only local charities, is that correct?
Oh yeah, so it would be geographically throughout South Africa. If we do have when we do have international students, if there's a group in a specific area, then it would be slightly different, and they would work with the charity close to them. But we haven't actually encountered that, so that's a good point. We can encourage them. Yeah.
Okay.
If you want, I'm sorry, I don't want to take too much voice, but I've got a small slide that amplifies that. Can I just quickly show it or not?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, and so just picking on the same thing that Jane has said, which I thoroughly agree, how we've institutionalized that. We set up an NPO called MBA, okay? And that's worked with, and we have a multiple things for business school, working on scholarships, MPO activity, you know, full immersions, collaborations, family-friendly MBA, all the stuff which I fully support. And what we've done is we've worked here with this over 300 NPOs, 75,000 years of engagement as integrally part of what we do. And the reason we do that is exactly what Jane's saying. It's not for the NPOs, it's for the students. The students become grounded into the reality of their context and cannot sit within the matrix of the corporate environment, allowing them to think that they are detached and abstract and disassociated from life. They have to dig into life and see the consequences on society of their actions. And so I hugely applaud what Jane's doing. And we've also been doing similar things for a long time. And I would say it's a really effective way to ground your business school.
I see. Oh, interesting. So I actually just got a question while we're talking about this come through. So Jane, in the selection of charities, are there specific criteria that must be met?
So at this stage, we do. So we've had issues in the past where the charities are not registered, you know, and they don't have the requisite forms and that. So if a group comes to us with a charity who needs to put that in place, our students then either they would need to help them get all their registration forms sorted out and registered as an MPO, because there is a monetary kind of donation from the business school to the best group, the group who really shows what they've done. So from our perspective, we need charities to be registered. but if there's a compelling, there's nothing in terms of what the charities do. You know, it doesn't have to be specifically in education or human trafficking or domestic violence, or it's open. We've had people with you know, schools or agribusiness, different areas like that. So, you know, there's not really a huge criteria.
I see. Thank you. I've got a question here for yourself, Helmi. So, in your presentation, when you talk about the examples of challenges like knowledge transfer, you're talking about curriculum misfit as one of the challenges. Could you please elaborate a little bit more on what you mean exactly by that?
Yeah, sure. Basically, this relates to what Ali put it nicely as African narrative. So from what I have seen, from my experience for the last 20 years, either in the MENA region or even here in Europe, is that whenever we are teaching our students, usually we are inspiring ourselves from international standards, best practices that are coming from abroad, etc. So what happens in the end, if I take the example of accounting, we just focus too much on international accounting standards, for instance. And then when you look at the economic ecosystem that you have, basically it's composed from small and medium enterprises. So we are preparing what we feed our students with is different from what the market is expecting, from what the society is expecting. Another example, for instance, a course like accounting theory. So accounting theory is based on at least what is written in the textbook that we are using in business schools, in many of the business schools in the MENA region, and also in Africa. The theories are coming from Western thought without taking in consideration the local context. If you ask me, whenever I got my master's degree, I got the same course. So accounting history, we talked about Munich, we talked about Littleton, Patton, etc. But we've never talked about Al-Maqrizi, for instance, who wrote about the economic development in the Middle East and Egypt in particular. So this is the curriculum misfit I was talking about.
I see. Okay, thank you for that. I've got another question for Tavi, raise your hand. Did you have a question, Helmi, or did you just press the raise your hand?
Oh, sorry for that. It was my mistake.
No worries, no worries. Okay, so I've got a question here for yourself, Ali. So, you know, you talked a lot about the kind of like developing social change agents. Do you have any like really good examples of how a school that's listening now can successfully create a social change agent? And also, what is the difference between a social change agent and an activist, or are they the same?
Well, a social change agent is more pragmatic. It's more has more better engagement with society. I mean, I could be activist without any. It's like a rebel without a cause, kind of a thing. I hate to be facetious about it, but a social change agent, by definition, this is someone who is involved in very much engaged with the community, and he has the humility to sort of learn and support and maybe even facilitate rather than dictate or tell them what needs to be done. Now, are we doing this in schools of business? In sporadic ways. I mean, this is against the elitist way we think. This is against the bubble we live in. I mean, Helmi talks about it. I mean, when you go out in real life, I mean, in the base of the pyramid, which is 70–80% of the population, it's amazing. I mean, we don't teach those guys anything about how to act into this. I gave you an example of philanthropy. We're leaving the majority of the money paid, and then we end up talking about the 20-30%. There is something in the mindset, there is something in the culture of business schools that has to change. Does not happen. Otherwise, we end up doing it in small little things. One of the interesting things also about teaching business, and I think it's happening, started to happen, I would love to see every business student taking a course in anthropology. When you talk about ethnography, for example, I mean, the way you recognize what base of the pyramid customers want is not your panel, whatever that you do for the A+ customer. You actually have to go, you do interviews, you test them, you have to test them once or twice because those guys are not gonna try to sort of upset you. So this is a very nice way to teach our students how to conduct an interview, a proper interview, how to engage with society, how to appreciate culture. We talk about culture of organizations. Well, guess what? Culture of an organization is a subset of a culture of society. And some of the techniques that are used in anthropology or ethnography are actually valid for corporations. We rarely teach our students those kind of things. Governance, for example. I mean, governance is very critical. I'm diverting a little bit, but I just wanted to see, I mean, governance tends to be in the realm of political science, period. When we talk about governance, it tends to be accounting, and we talk about it from a realm of organization. What really hurts you is not that whether a certain organization is well governed or not. What really hurts you more is whether a total ecosystem is well governed or not. And this is a major issue. It's becoming a major issue. And it's, by the way, this is not just a developing country issue. It's becoming even a developed country issue. And I could show you many examples, whether in the US or in Europe, that this is happening. So again, to get back to your question, so we do it, but it tends to be here or there. I mean, it's not like it's really a coherent way. And I think it had to do with, this is not in the mindset. This is not the way we are. It's not in our DNA, sort of say.
Definitely. Yeah, because there was one question came through as you were talking about anthropology, like what about having that alongside philosophy? So you're covering pretty much the whole thing there. You'll always be coupled together, right? John?
Yeah, I mean, let Helmi and Jane and Ali give you the best picture on the philosophy side, but I just want to point out that IDEO, for example, a great, idea generator and spawned off many imitators and has focused on innovation, changing the way business works. The way they research for their fundamental new ideas is ethnographic. They get anthropologists and architects and other people into their team doing the interviews for the exact reason Ali's talked about. And so this is sporadically there, but it's bizarre that this ethnographic research has been elevated to the elite again of new high-tech ideas. Why don't we apply this to innovating education so we can get really good education, which is easy to provide actually with technology, globally produced to people? And why not do blockchain accreditation and qualifications instead of doing national qualifications, which are so hidebound by national higher qualifications authority? Why don't we start thinking about global qualification frameworks to reach the global people with the brilliant ideas that we have, which then need to be put into action, not just thought about, and not left with the elite?
Helmi, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just taking over on the philosophy side. Now, just to share this little experience with you, what we have done since last year at Rennes School of Business, it would be interesting. We created a Center for M-frame thinking, because if you see our logo is M-frame thinking. We took this, philosophy since 2018, and this center basically is a multidisciplinary center where we have our researchers, people who are specialized in accounting and finance, in supply chain, and. But from the other hand, we have people who are coming from other disciplines. So recently, we are inviting somebody who is an artist. We have anthropologists. We have people who are specializing in sociology, psychology, who are joining the team to discuss about these subjects. And part of these people, they are also invited to our classrooms, to our students, PhD, DBA, and master's students, and we plan to get this experience even deployed to our undergraduate students, and actually even for our undergraduate students, we introduced a course for geopolitics for now, to give these different perspectives on how things are done. So just I want to share this little experience with everybody.
Thank you, Helmi. Okay, so we're closely approaching the end of today's session, and we're out of questions and answers as well. So for the last few minutes, are there any final thoughts or comments or advice from the panelists to give all the attendees? John?
I would love to say thank you very much. I've actually learned a heck of a lot from my fellow panelists and you, and I'd like to thank them so much for that. It's also really encouraged me also to take them seriously in their ideas about transforming business schools. We did talk about the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid, and I'd just like to look at a paradox about that very briefly. We talk about, this is from 2002 from Paralat talking about it. He's saying his idea was that that's a population earning more than 20,000. He said, look, 4 billion earning, 4 billion earning $1,500. That's a heck of a lot more money there. So we should access that at the market. I like that, but isn't that not what we should be doing? Isn't the point that we should be we should be lifting people from there, not seeing them as a market, but seeing them as development and national creation and prosperity source, not as a market. We should be transforming, educating, and thus transforming our economies by accessing them with better education.
Ali?
The sheet that you've showed, John, is what people refer to as BOP 1.0. Now they're talking about 3.0. They moved from pure commercial source to actually co-creation. When you talk about co-creation, this means that it's mutually beneficial. This is very similar to what Marx calls the economics of mutuality. That it cannot just be that I sell to you, and selling sometimes could be exploitative because I exploit the desires of people to sort of look like, you know what I'm saying, like elitist or like look like. So they're getting more and more into value creation and mutual value creation. So that's the 3.0, and it's very much what you're saying.
I love that, but my point is, are we as business schools getting in there? I wonder, maybe you are, but maybe we need
no, the majority are no.
Oh, yeah.
Majority are no. There are some, Stu Hart is a collaborator with C.K. Praland. And he left your typical University of Michigan, wherever. He went to University of Vermont. The dean there had the guts to tell him, revamp completely the MBA. We're offering only one, which is called SIMBA, Social Enterprise Business, MBA, Social Enterprise. And those guys, they take courses for like a semester. And then they take them and then they threw them in real base of the pyramid tends to be more Latin America just because it's in the US, but you could do the same in Sub-Saharan Africa, India, even European countries. There are many European countries where they have base of the pyramid. They just don't. So there are some examples. Let me tell you one interesting remark, and it's really about the terrible influence of the American mindset. When you look at the social enterprise, the concept, it actually was started in Northern England, and it had very strong community-based mindset. It was about communities forming their own commercial aspects to serve the community. Now, when you go to the US, it's really about this guy who is leader or whatever you call him, and he's going to show people the salvation, and he's going to make money in the process. So we've transformed something which was very democratic into something which became more dictatorship. But again, this is the influence of the American mindset of what sustainability, what entrepreneurship should be. And I'm talking about social entrepreneurship, which should be really driven by community, not by just individuals.
Thank you for that, Ali. So we have now come to the end of today's webinar. So it's the second capacity building workshop for Africa and Middle East. I'd like to give a huge thank you to the 4 panelists, Ali, Jane, John, Helmi. Each of your presentations were incredibly thought-provoking and interesting, and I, for one, have learned a lot, and I'm going to take this with me as well and do a lot more reading on each of your topics. So yeah, thank you so much for coming here, and thank you on behalf of the attendees, because I'm sure they learned a lot as well.
Thank you.
Okay, no worries, no worries. I just brought it all together. You did all the work.
Well
Thank
done,
you
Ben.
very
Thanks
much.
for turning up, everyone.
Yeah, thank you
No
for
worries. Have a great day, everyone, and goodbye.
Yeah, cheers, bye.
By